Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I am your host, Keith Malinak. It's the Thursday Deep Dive. Thank you, Mary. Mary was so kind in the chat here before we got started. Uh, it said Wednesday Deep Dive. I don't know what day it is. Honestly, I don't know. It's Thursday. See, the sign even said, no, it doesn't say Thursday. Damn it. Okay, never mind. So Thursday Deep Dive. If you missed the Wednesday wild card 24 hours ago, Steve Friend was here. FBI whistleblower, and did he have some things to talk about? Bottom line is nothing good is seemingly happening inside the law enforcement arm of our government, federal government. So check that out later. Don't do it now because obviously you're busy right now. But later you want to check out the Wednesday wild card with Steve Friend. And then tomorrow, it looks like we're going to have 2 in a row, 2 days of a Rebecca sighting. That's the plan. So I won't have to lean on the cardboard mullah Rebecca. She'll actually be here. Kelly's gonna, I don't know, she's got like family things. Kids have, things they got to get to or whatever. Where are priorities? Brad. See, Rebecca better be here or else you're just stuck with me. That's the bottom line. Okay. So, looking ahead to next week, let's see. Yeah. So Stu's going to be here on the Wednesday wild card. Stu Bergier from formerly, I guess I have to say formerly, of the Glenn Beck program. Now he's doing his own stuff. We've got a lot to talk about with him. Thursday deep dive. Oh my goodness, we're going to talk about the history of the income tax, and the Patron's coming out for that episode for sure. For sure. It might come out today. I have to introduce you to someone that we have to have a serious discussion about vaccines, especially how they affect babies and children. And by the way, all the stuff that I'm explaining to you, atmshow.com, all these links that you need are available there because Wes is awesome. And don't forget Gabby over Instagram at The Mike Show. Everything you need, atmshow.com. But this is going to be an episode that is especially important, I think, to parents of young children. And it's the kind of episode and information that I wish I had. Oh, gosh, how old are my kids now? 23 years ago. Holy crap. Where does the time go? And grandparents, watch this episode. You may be moved to send it to your kids. I think we're going to learn a lot today. And so I want to bring in the co-author of a book. This is what led me to her. It's the Vaccine-Friendly Plan. And I'll explain my thought process here once I introduce her. Dr. Jennifer Margulis. I pronounced it right, didn't I? Margulis.
You did. Good job. Yeah.
I was afraid as I was getting closer and closer introducing it. I was like, don't screw this up, Malinak. Don't screw this up. But anyway, so thank you for making time, Jennifer Margulis. We're going to talk about vaccines today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
Absolutely. Okay, so just make sure I got all my housekeeping stuff there. Okay, so the vaccine-friendly plan. Let me just quickly a very quick backstory on my thinking on vaccines and how it led me to you for this conversation today. But 23 years ago, like I said, we had our first child, sweet young girl, and I wanted to be on that vaccine schedule. So help me. Got to make sure the kids get their vaccines and yada, yada, yada. And then we went through a period where we had no health insurance. And I remember going to the government clinic thinking, got to stay on that vaccine schedule, man. Got to make sure that Aslan gets it all the stuff. We had a folder. Doctor, we had paperwork. I made sure. I had the chart and mark it off. That was me 23 years ago. And then as time went along and I began to phase out any kind of consideration for the flu vaccine, because I remember Aslan was still small when I already started my mindset shift. And you get up to the youngest child. And by the time we got to the youngest child, who was born 5 years later, I was like, maybe she gets them, maybe she doesn't, maybe she gets some, I don't know, whatever. It took 5 years for me to be pretty ambivalent. Now, when someone accuses me of being completely anti-vax, yep, okay, fine. And thankfully, I got to that mindset before we hit the COVID-19 insanity. So there wasn't a chance in hell that I was going to take that vaccine. And now, as I will say, hopefully a future grandparent, I'm fine if my kids don't vaccinate their children. That's going to be their choice. But before I got to that point, I purchased this because I thought there's no way I'm going to convince my kids to not get any vaccine for the kids. This is the common sense plan here for where I kind of was in that little in-between phase. So I've done enough of a setup here about me, but this is what led me to you because you're the co-author of this book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan. And this is kind of the, I don't know, what you call it, the happy medium, I guess, for someone that maybe isn't so gung-ho about all the vaccines, but isn't ready to say none whatsoever. But I just want to talk to you and pick your brain. I've babbled enough, and I promise to stop now. So welcome. Talk to us about your own journey, I guess.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I want to say something right up the bat about the title of the book, okay? So a vaccine-friendly doctor, that was a term that was coined by Bob Sears, who's an incredible pediatrician based in Southern California. A vaccine-friendly doctor is a doctor who accepts and welcomes and supports patients who want to do some vaccines, want to do all the vaccines, or want to do no vaccines. So when you say vaccine friendly, that doesn't mean promoting every vaccine on the planet and going along with the pharmaceutical status quo. It refers kind of in the Underground Railroad secret language to doctors who are very willing to work with their patients no matter what. And so Bob Sears used to have this wonderful online list separated by geographical location of vaccine-friendly doctors. And then naturally, Nicole had that as well. Basically, doctors who said, yes, we identify as vaccine-friendly. So basically what that means is family forward, pharmaceutical back doctors. So I'm saying that to tell you and your watchers and listeners that it's always a legitimate choice to say no. And this is not a book that you read and you become highly, propagandized to do the vaccines. It's a book that you read that helps you realize that vaccines are only one tool in the medical toolbox, that there are so many other ways that we need to adopt to support our children's health, our pregnant women, our babies, our small children, our babies, our school age kids. And that if you want to do the vaccines, we need to consider this on a vaccine by vaccine basis and look at the specific disease, the risks and benefits, and the specific vaccine, the risks and benefits. So even though Dr. Paul Thomas, who's the first author on the book, had a vaccine plan that he used in his clinic the entire time, pretty much most of the time that he was still practicing pediatrics, he was always the doctor who said, I support you. I mean, once he had a wake up, he was you 23 years ago, Keith, and then things changed for him. I can talk a little bit about that. I might or might not get the details right. But he was a doctor that he would never kick somebody out of his practice for wanting to do things their way. So this is a book that empowers. It will empower your children to make the best choices for their future grandchildren. And honestly, so many people, I sometimes call it a gateway book, like a gateway drug, like it's a little bit of a gateway into not doing vaccines, if that's what you choose to do. And, when Dr. Thomas and I first met, I had been studying and thinking about and writing about these issues for, almost 2 decades. And he was kind of coming into this very powerful realization that the way he had been trained wasn't the best way in medical school. And so he was more extreme on the not conservative end, on the traditional allopathic medical model. And I was more like the hippie in Southern Oregon, telling him that it's really important to get all the toxins out of the environment, which he agreed with too, but he hadn't really considered that some people would just not do any vaccines. And now, of course, as his loyal fans and followers know, he's being much more open about, and he has changed his thinking, I believe. And, he's being much more open about saying at this point, at this juncture, with what we're seeing with the problems with children in America, he completely supports not doing any vaccines. I'm still somewhere in a little bit of a different space than he is, but I feel like it's complementary, not contradictory.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I will say that I think, I mean, there's so many different factions when it comes to vaccines, but correct me if I'm wrong here. I feel like there's some people who have sworn off all vaccines, but there's all and there's in between, right? Like I said at the onset, gung ho, pick and choose, sworn them off. But I think that there's even another category where folks are like, look, vaccines are fine. For the most part, they're fine. They're fine. You just don't maybe dump them all into a young child at the same time. Because as one of the things that I've talked about on this program, one of my youngest daughter's closest friends, she was behind on her schedule. And thank God, looking back with Aslan, I mean, we didn't get so far behind that we showed up to the clinic and they were like, oh, this child needs 13 shots right now. Because that's exactly what happened to our family friend. And her personality changed overnight. She went from a sweet little angel child to a hellspawn. And the way that her mom geniusly was able to bring that sweet child back was basically detoxed her for several years with an all-natural doctor guiding her, helping her with food choices and stuff. Because what would happen is, and you jump in here if you have thoughts on this, but what would happen in her case was when she would eat something that maybe had preservatives or something like that, it would trigger something in her and turn her back into that demon spawn, for lack of a better way to describe it. And so it's just been fascinating. And I think that is when I personally said, I'm good with nothing, foreign being injected into my young children. I think we're just going to go without them from here on out. So that's where we ended up.
Let me talk to something that you said right at the beginning when you were telling that story, and I'm devastated for your friend and her daughter, and it's amazing that she stayed the course and she's doing so well now. So she effectively detoxed. She clearly had a vaccine reaction. She was over vaccinated. Her body was on toxic overload. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not diagnosing anything at this juncture, but it's and that her mom was able to do that is wonderful, and a lot of people aren't so lucky. But the thing that you said before was like, some people are going to say it's not like all or nothing. It's not that all vaccines are evil for all people at all times. I mean, I like to use the analogy of antibiotics, because we can all know that antibiotics are being overused, overprescribed, and inappropriately so. We know that they have negative consequences for the human immune system and the human organism. Does that mean if you and I speak out very vociferously against the overuse of antibiotics, does that mean that we're anti-antibiotic? I mean, in some ways, I am a little anti-antibiotic, and that doesn't mean that I absolutely think that they're indicated when they're needed. But look at this. When I put this together, because we had a very we kind of came to the whole vaccine debate through personal experience. Luckily, we did not have a child that had a terrible reaction. But I was a very educated young adult, 26, 27 years ago, right? When my oldest was born. I've got you beat, by the way. My kids are older than yours. And my husband and I had been in a monogamous relationship for 3 years, and we had both tested negative for hepatitis B because we had to get a marriage license, and they test you in your prenatal care. So I was hepatitis B negative. He was hepatitis B negative. I have this absolutely beautiful, gorgeous baby. Every cell in your body when you have a baby wants to protect that baby, do right by that baby, and keep that baby alive. I mean, we are protecting our babies. We're humans. We want to be as protective. We're mama bears at that moment. And the nurse comes at me with a needle and with a syringe and saying, oh, it's time for her Hep B vaccine. She didn't say, let me talk to you about hepatitis B. Let me, let's go over this, or, nothing. She just said, time for her Hep B vaccine. And I did the protective mama bear thing. I don't know if your listeners can see me, but like,
Yeah.
where I was like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
And I had had every vaccine that I was supposed to have at the time. And I had had way more vaccines, Keith, because I lived and worked in West Africa as a young adult. And there were certain vaccines that I got then. So I never had any sense of like, I'm anti-vaccine or there's anything wrong with vaccines. In fact, I was like, okay, I can't, this is wonderful that we have this medical tool in the toolbox, right? And then she says, time for your hepatitis B vaccine. And all I said was, I'm not willing to do that now. I want to talk to my daughter's pediatrician. That's all I said. And I remember the feeling of kind of holding my daughter closer. And the nurse got furious. I mean, she got so upset with us about it. She was like, she acted, you're very primed also. I mean, as a new mom, you're very aware of the people around you and the energy that you're getting from them because it's very intuitive. It's very survivalist, like your instincts are keeping you alive. So if there's some kind of a threat, you're going to really notice it. And I really felt how upset the nurse was with me. And I'm like, doesn't make any sense. And because I didn't say I'm not doing it. I was planning to do it, Keith. But all I said was, I want to talk to my daughter's pediatrician. I'm not ready to do that yet, and she was acting as if it was some absolute urgency. Now, how could it possibly be urgent to vaccinate a child against a sexually transmitted disease that child has literally no quantifiable ability to catch or get in any way, shape, or form? Meaning there is zero risk of getting the disease. Whether there's a problem with the vaccine is something else we can talk about, but I just want to make the earlier point. And then why would a nurse get furious? Well, that was when my spidey sense took over.
Yeah. How dare you question authority? I'm a medical professional. Who do you think you are? A new mom?
Well, I wasn't a medical professional, and and at that point I was finishing a PhD at Emory University. But I mean, I was a very educated person. I was a professional researcher. So I'm a researcher, a professional researcher. What are you talking about? But let me just show you. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but if you, on page 318 and 319 of this book, so this was the schedule for children born prior in 1983, and you and I were both born before that. So our schedule, Keith, was even smaller. Like it would be something more like that.
Yeah.
Now, when the book came out in 2016, we decided we wanted to put in the schedule. So now please let your people realize this is now out of date because it doesn't include the COVID vaccines. And maybe you can hold it up on your end because it will be easier for people to see. So now look at the schedule. It doesn't just fit on that one page.
Oh, yeah.
Go to the next page.
Look at that, y'all. Holy crap.
When I did that and I realized that we were not going to be able visually to put all of the vaccines, quote, required or, in 2016 onto one page to do a side-by-side analysis, I literally cried on the phone to my publisher. And the publisher is Ballantine. They're part of the Big Five in New York City. They actually published also the American Academy of Pediatrics, and good for them. This is a bastion actually of anti-censorship that they were willing to publish this book, which in a lot of ways we problematize, nuance, and even go against the American Academy of Pediatrics because all of your people are sophisticated enough to know they do not have our children's best interests in mind. But when I called her because she and I were a little bit on the same page of wanting to give parents absolute informed consent, which is something else maybe we can talk about, and also give them choices and also believing in medical freedom. But, she was coming from the side of, let's do them all and we can trust the CDC, we can trust the AAP. And I was coming from the side of let's trust the parents, let's let the parents decide based on their particular risk of exposure, genetic background, and risk benefit analysis. But we were so talking about it, and we were both kind of in stunned silence when we saw that. I mean, it's really shocking. And the older people don't realize it. Nobody who had their kid, none of the parents of my parents' generation and yours understand that we've taken something that may have been a good thing and we've absolutely overloaded our children and our adults' systems with it.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. So if you're sitting at the Thanksgiving table and maybe it comes up, little baby Sally here. How's she doing with her vaccines? Oh, well, we're taking a cautious approach. What do you mean you're taking a cautious approach? I mean, trust me, I know these conversations,
Yeah.
and they apply to pretty much everything that you choose to do as a parent that goes against the grain, that
That's
goes against tradition. I mean, I don't get me started on the homeschool conversations that have happened in my family. But anyway, but yeah, so you're gonna is it time? Which vaccine are they? Well, hesitate. What do you mean hesitate? They don't see the nuance
No.
of the dozens more shots to stay on schedule, to stay in the good graces of the establishment medical community. And it's like you said, it's not the same schedule that in 1983 or in 1976 or what have you. And in fact, I think I have somewhere in here. Oh yeah, look at it. Look at this. Very similar to what you just showed there. Here's the CDC. This is just the first 12 months of life, and only the best top quality graphics and production here on At the Mic. This is a famous chart that goes around in 2025. If you're going to stay in compliance with federal guidelines before RFK's HHS took in, that's how many shots that your baby of the first 12 months was supposed to get injected into its little body. And we could talk about the immune systems that are developing in these babies. And you even mentioned it earlier. We got to talk about the pregnant mothers. I mean, and what they're exposed to through these shots. But the point is, and Robert Kennedy has made this very clear in interview after interview after interview and book after book after book, is that what was it, 1988? The law gets signed that exempts drug makers from any kind of liability for injuries that occur. And they establish this fund that gets absolutely no money in it whatsoever, and for vaccine injuries or harm from them. But that opens the floodgates. And now all of a sudden, you need this, this. And if you don't have this, well, then we can't even let you into the damn school, public schools. And kudos to, I mean, that I would love to see numbers. I'm totally off tangent because that's what I do here. I would love to see how many people homeschool just because they don't want their kids forced into vaccines schedules at schools in many states. So, yes, it's a completely different, it's not apples to apples when you're having a conversation in 2026 about childhood vaccine schedules as opposed to when your parents were going through and rolling up their sleeves.
But let's go back to that conversation at Thanksgiving, or maybe at Easter would be more relevant, right? Because we're in April now, or July 4th or whatever, which is the holiday coming up, right? Let's go back to that. Those very well-meaning relatives of yours or friends or whoever, because I like to believe that really why they're asking the questions is because what they're secretly saying is like, we're scared, we feel a little worried. We know there's a lot to be out there today that we should be concerned about our beautiful, your beautiful children, right? And they think that they're just talking to you with actual reasoning and logic. But what they're doing is they're spewing pharmaceutical public relations talking points. They're actually telling you PR pieces that they have heard over and over and over again. So I'm saying this based on research and evidence, not based on some kind of, I'm scared of the conspiracies, which I think people should have a healthy fear and a healthy radar for. There are, conspiracy theories are only considered conspiracy theories until they're proven to be true. But I'm telling you that the pharmaceutical industry is spending a huge amount of time and money making sure that these little sound bites become earworms basically in people's brains. And so when someone is talking to you and they get angry and upset and they say something, they don't, and then you reply with a nuanced reply, like you said, the nuance is lost at the Easter table, right?
Yeah, right.
But you trigger a huge emotional response. I mean, I've had people who've known me for years and know that I'm a level-headed, sort of research-minded, science-forward person say to me, "Oh my God, but you're not anti-vaccine, are you?" And they literally do it like, oh my God, like they're asking me, it's so weird.
Right.
And I say, and that's what we do to shut off the conversation, is to try to throw shade at people who have a different point of view, instead of saying, let me hear what you have to say and let me consider it. And what you're saying is absolutely threatening me. Unbelievably so, because we are threatening the status quo, because the status quo is not working. Our children are sick. They're sicker than they've ever been in modern medicine, human history, when we've had the benefit of modern medicine. The fact that we are seeing such sick kids in America, especially, but other places in the industrialized world, you have to start saying, what is going on? Why do we have immune damaged, brain damaged, chronically diseased children? Why are we riddled with, our kids are riddled with cancer? And if that were not the case, we would not be having the conversation. So these pediatricians who attack me like crazy, I mean, they attack everybody else much more because I'm so much less important than someone like RFK, but they who are just vehement and furious, like, how dare you question the system? Well, the only reason a parent is questioning the system is because the system isn't working. The system is broken. Instead of being ostriches with our heads in the sand, we want to fix the system so the kids can be healthy. So we are all on the same team.
Yeah.
Team healthy kids. Hello.
Team healthy kids. Hello. Yes. And I'm about to say something, and I don't want the audience who are somewhat familiar with my family. I'm not speaking of specific people in my family. My grandmother, by the way, is 100 years old, and she's from the greatest generation. And I just wanted to preface that by just saying this is a very broad description of people from these generations from my point of view. But I would say the greatest generation that went through the Great Depression probably leans on government support, mentally speaking. Like, they've gone through that, and they've seen, like, the FDR New Deal, and the government's we're gonna defer to the government. They're gonna protect us. Again, it's a very broad strokes here. Then you've got their kids, the baby boomers, who lean on experts. How could you teach your kids? You don't have an education degree. How could you not put vaccines in your kids? Doctors say you should. And so then I think you get to us, Gen X, and we're like, okay, well, I've got questions. I'm going to think this stuff through before I just trust the government blindly, or trust big business effectively, or trust the experts to my kids. I've seen, like you just said, the health numbers, and I've also seen the education numbers from public schools. So I'm going to do my own research, and I'm going to make my own decisions. And it's my hope that my kids, who I can never remember, I guess they're Gen Z, so I guess we skipped something in there. But anyway, I hope that they are more independent minded than I have been, because as I detailed earlier, I had to get there. I didn't just wake up one day and just go, you know what? Screw your flu vaccine, and I'm not taking any vaccines. I had to get there. I had to do my own research, but I did get there. And I hope that they're starting at that same place that I already got to, and then they can go do whatever they want to from there. But I do want to get your thoughts also before I forget. We got to talk about pregnant women. We got to talk about mothers to be, because that is just as important as what you're giving to the kid once they're born. Yeah,
absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite topics. So before I wrote this book with Paul, I wrote a book called Your Baby, Your Way. And that book contains a chapter on vaccines, and it's about pregnancy, childbirth, and the first year of life. That book is a deep dive into how money is influencing everything that we suggest for pregnant women, childbirth and the first year of life. And let's talk about some of the best practices in pregnancy are obviously at odds, right? Now in this case, we're going to be talking about the American College of Obstetrics and Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That's the trade organization that puts out these recommendations, and also the CDC. But pregnancy and vaccines is very easy in my book, literally and figuratively. You don't do any. Period. You say it's not even a question unless, in the absence of a very different, if you were flying over to a underdeveloped country where you knew you were going to be exposed to something, we could talk about it differently. But really, the entire medical establishment always said in pregnancy, we've got to be careful. We tell pregnant women not to eat soft cheese, which makes the French just hilariously laugh. And we tell them not to empty their children's, for some of them, they are their children, their kitties' litter boxes.
Right. I've heard that a lot.
And we tell them to stay away from raw fish, which also makes the Japanese make fun of us. And we tell them all these things. And then once you have a baby, isn't it interesting that when you start feeding that baby food, you know that we've made a generation or several generations of parents so unbelievably neurotic and uptight because a baby can't just take some food. They have to have the tiniest little bit, and then you have to wait, and maybe you should wait 3 days, maybe 4, maybe a week to see if the baby has a bad reaction, and then you're going to introduce the next food. So there's something terrifying to modern pediatricians who are following the status quo about organic mushed up yams that you would feed to a little baby. Those are terrifying. They might kill the baby. Don't give them anything else. Make sure that they're not, allergic to the yams, but we are going to jab them full of all these vaccines at the same time, at the same visit. So in terms of pregnancy, the first thing that Dr. Paul would tell his expectant parents, because he was a pediatrician, but he'd have people come and interview to see if they wanted him to be their child's pediatrician. He would say, you've got to get every toxin out of your house, out of your food, out of your water as much as you can, and don't do any vaccines. And that is not as hard a sell as not vaccinating the baby after the baby is born. But I think that people can understand that we don't want to take a risk of overstimulating the immune system during pregnancy. There's a reason why the immune system is depressed during pregnancy, so that the woman will not miscarry the baby by recognizing the baby as foreign, right? And during COVID, of course, we got the opposite, and people were saying, you've got to do it. And we saw a huge rise in miscarriages. I mean, it's documented, and we've seen now documented in the peer-reviewed literature. Yes, that over vaccination during pregnancy, or vaccination with the COVID, especially the mRNA vaccines, can be devastating to fetal health.
Yeah, I've got a thing here. Let's see. This is from Naomi Wolf that said she was doing this speech, and 81% of the women in one section of the Pfizer documents who were pregnant lost their babies. Pfizer knew a month after the rollout that the vaccines didn't work to stop COVID. And yet they just rolled on. And it's just, and nobody's going to be held accountable. That's what pisses me off more than anything. There's no accountability in this.
Well, and if we're talking just for a minute about the COVID vaccines, I recently saw that somebody who tallied it up. We have, there's a problem with peer-reviewed science, but that's another conversation. But we have now like over 4,000 peer-reviewed scientific articles showing problems with the COVID vaccines. If that is not enough, every person who has a little lawn sign that says trust the science, well, let's whatever that means, which is ridiculous, because you don't trust the science. That's what a teenage boy says when he wants a teenage girl to go to bed with him. He says, trust me, you won't get pregnant. So I don't believe that we should sort of blindly trust the science, but I will say that now that we have literally 4,461 or something like that peer-reviewed articles, according to, a study that was counting them up, of adverse reactions. And I was following all of this in real time during the, the so-called, the lockups. That's what I like to call them.
The lockups. Yeah.
I was working as a science writer and a health journalist for the Epoch Times, and I was writing 2 science stories a week. And most of the time, our readers were so interested in vaccine safety issues and the mRNA vaccines. And I was co-writing several of those many of the articles I co-wrote with a biochemist, I believe he is, and he was a vaccine developer, absolutely brilliant man named Joe Wang. And, he could read the really hard science and the really hard biochemistry, and it was devastating to watch. So this was before we had 4,400. This is when we just started, brave scientists started coming forward, and doctors could not mask what they were seeing in their practices, and they were publishing case reports, and some of those case reports are devastating. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that you have listeners and watchers here who have had terrible COVID experiences, because some people did whatever you want to say that was or wasn't, right? But the kinds of things that we were seeing, like we were seeing necrosis on the vulva of girls. So there are case studies now where it was causing, I can't remember the exact word, it's like vulvar necrosis. It's a condition, and we were seeing that post COVID vaccine, and we had case studies in an 81-year-old, if I'm remembering correctly. We had one in a 7-year-old. And to me, if you have something that is, and somebody might say, well, that's temporal, meaning it's just in time, it's a coincidence. Well, any investigator worth their salt is going to really perk their eyes up at a coincidence, because most of the time, if you take an aspirin and it takes your headache away, is it just a coincidence that you took the aspirin before the headache went away? Nobody's going to say that was just a coincidence. But you get a vaccine and you're dead in 5 hours, and they say, oh, he would have died anyway.
Oh,
okay then.
Oh yeah, and real quick, thank you so much there, Flensborg. I appreciate you over there on the other side of the ocean, for your donation. We could do a whole nother show on COVID and the fallout from that, and we might need to do that. But you're bringing back memories from that era, and the doctors that did speak out, the hostility toward them was like that nurse with the needle in the hospital when you had your baby, and it's just like it's so misplaced, this anger over anyone who is asking questions or pointing out just simple facts.
Absolutely.
That is no, I thought the scientific method, I thought we were supposed to ask questions and test stuff, but I want to talk about the ingredients inside vaccines, because you're not just putting in this quote vaccine in your baby to keep it from getting in some cases a sexually transmitted disease, but there are other things like aluminum and other particles. Can you explain some of the stuff that's inside of these vaccines for us?
Absolutely. I have to say one thing first, though,
Sure,
which is
please.
the opposite also happened during COVID, where I literally got a phone call from a colleague and a friend. Our kids were the same age, and so we'd been in community for a long time, and she called me. She's a wonderful, phenomenal medical doctor who really cares deeply about children's health. And she saw what was going on during COVID. And for the first time in her life, she had always been a doctor who would, if you pushed back, she'd say, okay. But she really would try to push you to do the vaccines on the CDC schedule. She was very allopathic. She was very conventional doctor, very straight arrow. And she started looking at this COVID stuff, and she said, oh my gosh, what is going on? And, that happened with so many people. That's how Peter McCullough, the doctor who's a cardiologist, who I'm sure many of your watchers are very familiar with, started. Peter McCullough called me in 2020, I think, and said, Jennifer, talk to me about vaccines and autism. Like, I need to know what's going on. Like, do vaccines cause autism? And I'm like, Peter, how much time do you have?
Right.
We need to have a really long conversation. But
we're getting there too.
Yeah, he had never considered those things before.
Interesting.
And same with my colleague who called me, who's now just, not a public person about it at all, because wanting to, keep their job and all the rest of it. But is very much on board, much more than ever before, with with informed consent and with parental choices. And so there is that silver lining in a way. It's so interesting how another pediatrician just reached out to me like last week and said I was a COVID casualty or something. He said, I'm so embarrassed to admit it, but I was one of the doctors who tried to bully my patients into following my advice when it came to vaccines. And now I know I'm wrong. And so this is something that has made it into the mainstream media, Keith, and they're reporting now. CNN, I think it was CNN, it might've been CBS News, I think it was CNN though, did a huge story recently about how parents in the delivery room are saying no. And I wrote about that from a completely different point of view. Absolutely, parents in the delivery room are saying no, and they're saying no to hepatitis B. And anybody who looks into the research is going to choose to wait on hepatitis B. Unless they're a drug addict, unless they're a prostitute, unless they think that their child is going to be cared for by someone in South Asia who's going to exchange bodily fluids with that child who is hepatitis B positive.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I just wanted to say that, and now I
No.
forgot what your question was. Sorry.
It was going to be the ingredients inside
Yes,
these shots, but
wonderful. Yeah,
now you made me think of
fabulous.
something else too. See, it's
Well,
just
the
we just
ingredients are really important. So, and I would urge any parent or grandparent who is new to these issues, and I mean, if they're listening to you, maybe they've thought about them a little bit, but who just feels like, I just want to outsource to my doctor, which I understand. We like experts. We want someone to tell us what to do, especially when you're in a sort of state of anxiety and it's hard to be a new parent. But I would encourage every single one of those people to look the doctor in the eye and say, very, very gently, could you please tell me all of the ingredients in all of the vaccines you're recommending for my child today? And the doctor will not be able to. 9 times out of 10, the doctor, maybe 10 times out of 10, Keith, the doctor is going to say, has no idea. So then that same parent could take this book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan, because we actually have a list of the ingredients, vaccine by vaccine, in the appendix. And that's where I showed you the list of this many for the age, 1983, and then this many after they took liability away from the pharmaceutical companies, which is very, very telling in and of itself. Oh, I
it
guess
sure is
a coincidence, but whatever. But then that same nice meaning parent who's absolutely ready to get on board and do what the doctors want them to do can then take those ingredient lists and show them to the doctor and say, now could you show me the science that shows that injecting my 2-month-old with polysorbate 20 and polysorbate 80, both of which are known endocrine disruptors, both of which are linked to cancer, could you show me the science that shows that that's safe? And the answer to those 2 questions is going to be no. No, they don't know the vaccine ingredients, and no, they can't show you any proof of safety. So right there, that should give any new parent pause. And hopefully that conversation can also give the pediatrician a little bit of pause. And if the pediatrician says, well, if you don't do the vaccines, then you're out of my practice, then you say, thank you so much. I won't let the door hit me in the ass on the way out. I'm gone, and I'm going to find a better, more evidence-based, more science-oriented, more patient-friendly doctor.
Yep.
But the main, so.
No, I just, and that's what's so frustrating is that this is not probably, since the liability was taken away, 40 years ago now, almost, I don't know. This administration and this HHS seems like probably the only opportunity for generations that we're going to get to try to pull back to some common sense on the vaccine schedule. But yet, apparently a federal judge has shut down the reform that knocked it down from 17 to 11. We weren't even taking them away. The government was still recommending double-digit shots. And so it's so difficult. That's why I go back to my generational broad brush view of how they viewed different things like the government. Even when you have, quote, common sense government reforms happening, there's still going to be those that are going to look at that and say, well, they're still recommending 11 shots. So, I mean, why don't go? I want the government to recommend nothing, but that's just me. Okay, so
and actually, in a way, that is the case. So what happened? People need to realize this too, and this is in the Constitution, that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, based in Atlanta, Georgia, they make recommendations, and then each state, on a state-by-state basis, makes them, quote, required. But every state, and required for what? Required for school inclusion, which goes back to your question about homeschool, or people choosing to homeschool because they do not want to do the shots and they feel like they can't go into school, and required for daycare. So it's daycare, school, and school for public, right? Daycare and public school. And that doesn't mean that a parent has to do them and that their child is going to be ostracized. It just means that you have to fight. And in every state in the union, we have medical exemptions. So the medical exemption is if you can get a doctor to sign off that says this vaccine is not safe, these vaccines are not safe for my child for medical reasons, they have to, by law, allow your child to be included in school. Then there's states that offer philosophical exemptions and religious exemptions. And of course, I believe very strongly that every state should offer all 3, because we absolutely we say that we live in a free and fair society, and that we believe in freedom of religion in this country, and we believe of freedom of thought, don't we, Keith? At least
No.
theoretically.
Thank you. You listened to yesterday's show. Yes, it's a theory.
The theory, exactly.
We teach our kids that. Let's put it that way.
Right. So that would suggest that we should absolutely have freedom of religion, and there are very strong religious reasons to do no vaccines, and we also should be able to pick and choose the vaccines. But one of the pharmaceutical playbooks, let's be real. The more you vaccinate, let's just talk about this as it is. What it is you have a captive audience. You have about a little less than 4 million babies born in America per year. You give every single one of those babies a jab in the thigh with a hepatitis B vaccine, you have made millions and millions of dollars. And any doctor who says to you, I'm not doing vaccines because of the money, is lying to himself and lying to you. And I can, cite the peer-reviewed science to prove that. But it's a phenomenal business model to have a liability-free product. That means if you say yes to that hepatitis B vaccine and your child has an anaphylactic reaction to one of the ingredients and dies, well, guess what? You will not be able to sue the manufacturer and get any kind of day in court. You will not get discovery. You will not get honesty. You will have a dead baby and no way to pay for the coffin. I mean, I'm exaggerating, because you would be entitled to $250,000 as a death payout that comes from a tax on every vial of the vaccine. A lot of people don't know this. Those of us who have looked into it can't believe we have to keep repeating it, Keith. But I said that to a very dear family member who happens to be a lawyer. And he said, that's absolutely not true. That can't be possible. And I said, go ahead and look it up. Please fact check anything I'm saying. Unfortunately, the manufacturers are liability free. They're liability proof. So they have multi-million dollars in profits. I mean, billions and billions at this point, and no accountability whatsoever. Even if I were not concerned about vaccine ingredients and doing too many too soon, the fact that those two things exist would make me very reluctant to want to do any vaccines in this current climate for my babies.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's what I want to know. If you know the answer to this, how did the Hep B, how did that get on the schedule? Did you just have a great lobbying firm saying, hey, parents, look, you never know when your baby, age 2, might decide to start taking illicit drugs.
Don't underestimate the power of the pharmaceutical lobby. Right. I mean, so what I know about this is from interviewing an incredible scientist named Tina Kimmel, who was she's a PhD, and she was working in California immunization board. And she was one of the people implementing immunizations in California. And then I also know about it from Paul Thomas, who was active as a pediatrician. So he was following this in real time. So hepatitis B used to be only given to at-risk people. Now, this makes good sense, because if you are an immigrant from South Asia, you might want to do the hepatitis B. If you are a prostitute and you test positive for hepatitis B, and then there is the possibility that the baby can get hepatitis B from the vagina, from going through the vaginal canal into the world, and so they can be inoculated with hepatitis B, right? So, and if you're an intravenous drug user, also, Keith, that's very, very smart. If you need a drug transfusion, you're a baby and you need a drug transfusion in a country where they're not screening the blood transfusion. I think I said drug transfusion, a blood transfusion. And you're in a country where they're not screening the blood. They do screen the blood in America. The number is so low. It's like 1 in 750,000 vial, blood transfusions might have some hepatitis B. That doesn't even mean that you would necessarily get it, but it's even lower than that. But that's all I've been able to find inside the statistics. In all of those cases, the hepatitis B is a very reasonable option, right? Now, the equation completely changes for everybody healthy and anybody who's hepatitis B negative. But the thing is that the thinking, this is very, in my opinion, twisted brain thinking, was that, well, we can't get them in let's get them while they're in having their babies, because how are we going to reach the prostitutes and the intravenous drug users? Literally, this is one of the conversations they were having. And since we can't reach them any other way, even though we know that over 99% of the population is not affected by this, I mean, it's very, very low numbers of women having babies who happen to be hepatitis B positive. It's like, it's so low. But because we can't, let's get them, you know, while they're having their babies. And the thing is that it also makes sense to do hepatitis B for teenagers. If you have concerns about your teenagers, potentially makes sense, right? Let's just say it does. But to do this to newborns without having the thought that it might have a negative repercussion is insane. And so, I mean, it's just, I shouldn't say it's insane. It's not following the science, the evidence, or the logic. Let me say it more carefully and say it that way. So Tina Kimmel and her team, when they got, this was happening in real time, when they got the announcement basically saying from the federal government saying, we're now going to make the universal recommendation, she said the entire team of vaccinologists and vaccine specialists and, you know, public relations people and California Immunization Board, she said they all came out of their offices and they were just absolutely stunned into silence. And they said, what is going on? And then, because humans like to conform and the sheep follow the sheep,
This is, yes.
They went along with it instead of protesting it.
Yeah. See, now, as you've been telling the story about the hepatitis B vaccine and explaining, it's on two fronts. In hindsight, we should have all seen the groundwork being laid for conformity to the COVID vax, because you had the motivation for, hey, look at the dollars that we're going to get if we vaccinate every baby that's coming through here, and we also got the, well, let's just vaccinate everybody instead of going after the high risk people. I mean, it's the same formula for COVID. Everybody should get vaccinated, whether it works or not. That's a completely different discussion. Whether it shortens your life or cripples you, again, that's a completely different discussion. But still, it's like, look at the dollar signs we're getting from the government to inject all these people, and let's mandate it. Let's make sure that we can mandate it, and that would have expanded much further if there hadn't been at least a little bit of pushback that it got. And I contend that those mandates would have only continued if it just wasn't so overwhelming to so many people with common sense that bad things were happening to people that got the vax. And I think, sadly, I think that's what it took to pull back the PR campaign on that.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's a good segue into what is wrong with doing hepatitis B at birth, because I know that some of your people are thinking to themselves, well, I did it to my child and they're fine, right? And so what? Let's be extra cautious, or yeah, I don't want, you know, and they say, oh my gosh, one of the arguments, Keith, for doing hepatitis, requiring it, because you have to know that some of the states do not require it for school inclusion. These are the states where people are actually using their thought, you know, their logical thought processes. But the state of Oregon does require it for school inclusion. All of the liberal-minded states, they want to, the nanny states that think they know better than everybody else, and I don't want to ascribe negative motives to them, but they're requiring it. So what's the problem? Well, there's several problems, but one of the problems with this new iteration of the hepatitis B vaccine, this is not the hepatitis B vaccine that was given 20 years ago. They switched it because thimerosal, which is mercury, it's a form of mercury, was included in that hepatitis B vaccine, and some pretty good science was done. There was even a scientific study that was done on primates, so on, I think it was monkeys, showing that giving the mercury laden, I'm going to say it that way, hepatitis B vaccine at birth was pretty devastating for humans, for the, I guess I would say, the primate brain, right? And just, they were not showing good outcomes. And I'm impressed that they even did a study like that, because those studies are really hard to get through. But so the vaccine manufacturers voluntarily phased out the mercury from the vaccines, except they did not phase it out from all the vaccines. So it's still included in the multiviral flu vaccine. It's still included in one of the, I think, acellular pertussis vaccines, and which also that's a vaccine that we like to give to pregnant women. And there's also, I could be wrong about that one, but there's trace amounts of it from the manufacturing process in many of the vaccines. And I'm talking cumulative, right? If we started this conversation talking about the cumulative effects of over vaccinating. So maybe this tiny amounts of this absolutely toxic substance is not going to have an effect on your child if you're just doing one vaccine or one mercury containing product. But when you start doing a lot, you have a problem. So they realize this, and this is all, we have the CDC transcripts for this, and Naomi Wolf has written about it before as well. This is from a long time ago where they said, you know, the signal is not going away. The signal being that the vaccines are causing some kind of neurological damage, AKA autism. The signal's not going away. We never, this is from Simpsonwood. This was a secret meeting of the CDC with all these different players. I mean, secret might make it sound a little bit more pernicious than it was, but it was a closed door meeting, and we have the Simpsonwood transcripts. And then the other thing they said is that we never, oh my gosh, we never added up the cumulative effect of mercury. So what they do, they phase it out of Hep B and they put in a different, so mercury was used as is used as a preservative in the vaccines. But the problem is these vaccines, because our bodies have co-evolved, I believe, to cohabitate with viruses and bacteria. And the issue is not that you get one. The issue is when you get grossly out of balance. I mean, we have E. coli. You and I both have E. coli in our bodies. We have staphylococcal in our bodies. Like, people don't understand that bacteria are, you know, they understand that bacteria are beneficial, but they don't understand that some of these bacteria that we've been now trained, our minds have been co-opted to believe are absolutely terrifying and health devastating, are actually bacteria that we cohabitate with. So the issue here now is that we've got to make sure that when we make the vaccine less reactive because of the substance in the vaccine itself, like a live viral vaccine, they're very reactive, and that's in a way it's good, meaning that it stimulates the immune system in the right kinds of ways. The attenuated vaccines are not. And so now we add aluminum to them, right? And so the hepatitis B vaccine contains 250 micrograms of aluminum. I mean, it depends on which shot you get, but it pretty much across the board, 250 micrograms of aluminum. Now, that's not your child's only exposure to aluminum. And you maybe remember that aluminum is a known neurotoxin. So we know from the FDA's own handouts, own publications, and also in the appendices of the book of the vaccine friendly plan, we know at what level you give injected, or basically it's called parental aluminum, at what level to a newborn it's going to cause brain damage, because it's going to cause effects on the central nervous system. And it turns out if you have a premature baby, you give them the hepatitis B vaccine, you give them the vitamin K shot, which also several of the brands that Dr. Thomas and I analyzed, 2 out of 3, if I'm not mistaken, contains aluminum. Then you give them formula, which is an ingestible aluminum. And then you give them, because this poor little baby has a headache from having a horrible birth or being totally down, like loaded up on antibiotics and all these other things, right? Having come out through a hospital birth, or it had a C-section, blah, blah, blah. So then you give the baby Tylenol, which is acetaminophen. And what does acetaminophen do? Among other things, it makes it so your body cannot detoxify the aluminum that you've just exposed your child to. So what we think is that, I mean, so you're overloading a child's immune system with toxic exposures from day one of life, and then you wonder why our kids have such devastating outcomes, and the majority of children in America have some kind of chronic disease, and you wonder why the rates of autism have skyrocketed, which they have, despite all of the pharmaceutical desire to make it impossible for us to know that, or to make us question it. And, you know, you wonder why we're seeing so much encephalitis, encephalopathy, and autism in children. And I don't think you need to look further than the delivery room.
Yeah, right. So, and by the way, let me just throw this out here real quick. I have the Steve Kirsch post from a few months ago where he looked at a 2017 CDC study from the CDC. But ADD brain here. When I was a kid growing up and when I was a young adult, I was proud as a native Atlantan to hear, Oh, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. Yeah, you guys like that? That's in Atlanta. Now when I hear that, I was like, please don't say the Atlanta part. Please don't say the Atlanta part. It's just embarrassing now. But CDC study shows there's no scientific rationale for vaccine mandates for kids attending school. It's basically, it's neither here nor there. But that being said, put a pin in this. We need to talk about measles at some point today because, all of us anti-vaxxers, talking to me, we're responsible for the measles epidemic hitting nationwide. But I wanted to ask you, what's the justification? What's the rationale for putting an ingredient like aluminum into these products?
So I guess I was trying to explain that. I didn't explain it very well. So basically we need, no, that's my bad, not yours.
Okay.
Thank you for asking because it's an important point. So the aluminum is an adjuvant. Adjuvant is probably not a word that most people know, but it's basically put in the vaccines to make your body recognize that it is a foreign object. So here's the thing. In order for the immune system to kick in, right? Our immune system is like these soldiers, they're at the ready, but they need to know that there's an invader, there's an intruder. They don't put their guns on the intruder until they've recognized that someone is trying to break into the house. And if you just do attenuated viruses, right? If you just do vaccines without an adjuvant, basically to make the vaccine more foreign to your body, it's basically another way to say it is you're trying to make the vaccine toxic. And so your body will recognize it as a toxin and try to get rid of it. And then the idea is that the body is trying to deal with the aluminum and it realizes somehow by magic. I think that our cells are pretty incredible and marvelous and magical, but it realizes that it also will now recognize the attenuated virus as also something to be concerned about. Does that make sense? So that's why it's being used. And basically, people are saying, there's a movement to green the vaccines. And I like that idea because I do think that vaccine technology is fascinating and I think it's a great idea. And I think that, when you can get it to the point where it's working basically to program your body to recognize something toxic so that it will know how to deal with it in the case of a very devastating infection. All of that sounds fantastic. And so there's some, but there's very little money for this research. But some people are thinking that we can use gold nanoparticles as a way, instead of an aluminum adjuvant. The thing is, we need a better adjuvant. The aluminum, the cumulative exposure to the aluminum is absolutely one of the driving forces, I think, for brain and immune damage in children in America. So if we're going to keep going with these vaccines, we have to have a safer adjuvant, period. And the question is how and what.
And I talked about my own transformation. I will say one place that I've been very late to the party on is only in recent months, the seeking out deodorant that doesn't have aluminum. Is that a cause for concern? And again, we could do this all day and go into foreign objects in the air and all this stuff, foreign particles, microplastics. But I just wanted to ask you, since we're talking about aluminum, is there a reason for being concerned on that? Because if so, then I don't know why Old Spice isn't leading with, we're aluminum free instead of these freaky ads, with like I don't know, weird creatures and human animal hybrids. Put your advertising budget just in saying we're aluminum free deodorant, man.
I do think that is. So I am of the mindset. I said this to somebody the other day, like, how is it possible that someone who's being so careful can end up with when you actually get body burden testing, you find out that you have exposures that you thought you were trying very hard to not have. And I think, and what he said about, this is a doctor, and he said, named James Odell, wonderful doctor who runs an institute called the Bioregulatory Medicine Institute. Bioregulatory medicine is a term that most people don't know, but it's like integrative or functional medicine. So the idea is that you unleash the body's natural ability to heal. You use the best of Western medicine with the best natural healing modalities, which is kind of where I am in my thinking at this point. But I think that, and he said, Dr. Odell, he said, we live on a poisoned planet. And so on the one hand, this is very true, Keith, is that, we have seen forever chemicals, like you mentioned, microplastics in the tissue of polar bears in the Arctic. And, in the fat, in the fat tissue of polar bears. And so like, that's pretty devastating because if even a polar bear can't escape from these forever chemicals, what are we supposed to do? That said, absolutely anything and everything you can do to lower your body burden and to lower your exposure to toxins without getting super anxious and stressed out about it. The last thing I want is for any young parent to be listening to this show and being like, oh my goodness, I'm so stressed. And the reason why, Keith, though, is that because stress is also toxic to the human immune system, and anxiety and stress are not good for your, like, I see that look on your face.
I'm thinking I'm going to die tomorrow.
You're in trouble.
Oh, no.
So shake off the anxiety if you can and just say, yes, I'm going to make this a really fun game and I'm going to find all
noted
products, So what is that, by the way, since
that's Patron. That's our tequila here that we just sampled a week ago on the Friday Lights on the happy hour on Friday. And
you might pour yourself a nice big shot of that right now, kid. But
I got my Grimace glass. It's ready to go. Well, hold on. Let me just let me stop right there for a moment because everything seems toxic. And again, this could be a whole nother show. We might have to have you back to talk about the COVID vaccine and then have you back again to talk about how polluted everything around us is. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I just want to talk about that as an opportunity, not an anxiety. A lot of things are toxic, but the good news about that is that there are absolutely wonderful companies making incredible products that are not. And usually, just like with parents and vaccines, they come to it because they got so overexposed, to toxins, and that led to a cancer diagnosis or some kind of chronic disease, an immune disruption, right? So the good news is we have the wonderful small scale family farmers, and we do have even though I like to say bees don't know property line boundaries, and so you will see that in organic products you're going to see contamination, but the good news, and it doesn't have to be organic. What it has to be is the more hyper local your listeners can find their food, the better. And if they know the farmer and they know the practices, and the reason why I say, obviously it's great if it's organic, but the certified organic is another huge business. And a lot of the smaller farms who are doing things really well, Keith, they're really doing it well. If they can't get government funding for it, they can't end up getting certified. So just know where your food is coming from as much as you can, and then do everything you can to limit your toxic exposures, but have fun with it. Don't make it like this awful thing, but make it like a, wow, I never knew about this. Or, wait, what do you mean you can use white willow bark instead of aspirin as a painkiller? Like, oh, and the Egyptians write about that on on papyrus from ancient Egypt. I mean, it's like,
that's cool.
And we found have you ever heard of white willow bark?
No. In fact, you made me think, next time you're reaching for a drug, like if you have a headache or something, that would be a good use of AI or Grok or something like that to say, what's a natural way to stop a headache, right? And then you might get willow bark, huh?
Well, so I hope so. So white willow bark is one of my favorite herbs to have around. Basically, you can get it in capsule form, you can get it in tincture form, and it's just, that is how we made salicylic acid, which is aspirin. So aspirin was originally derived from white willow bark, and now it's synthetic. I don't know exactly how it's made. But I'm old enough, Keith, to remember when the doctor said, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. And aspirin is an absolutely wonderful, for me and my biochemistry and for my family, it's an absolutely wonderful pain reliever. And, we still use aspirin as an anticoagulant. So a lot of people who've had strokes or who have heart issues will take a baby aspirin a day. Aspirin is a fabulous painkiller. And I will make some people's blood pressure go up to their eyeballs when I say this, but the truth is that we used to also give aspirin to children. And when we were giving baby aspirin to babies, we had no problems with autism. And when we switched over from baby aspirin to Tylenol, which is one of the biggest toxins on the planet. And if you have small children at home, I would go look in your medicine cabinet right now. Take absolutely everything out that it contains acetaminophen, if you're an American listener, paracetamol, if you're a European listener, and put that stuff in the trash as fast as you possibly can. Never, ever, ever, if I can do one takeaway from this show, give your child Tylenol in conjunction with anything else that could be potentially neurotoxic, like any kind of aluminum product, any other pharmaceutical, or any vaccine. So in any case,
or you could just play it safe and just don't do Tylenol at all.
Just don't do Tylenol. And the
Just
problem is that people say, well, what am I going to do if I don't do Tylenol and my kid is crying? Well, first of all, your kid is going to have a lot fewer reasons to cry if you're not over vaccinating them right at the moment that they're born. And second of all, if you do things in a gentler way, so you consider maybe leaving your baby boy's penis intact. I don't know if you've ever talked about circumcision on this show, Keith.
We have not.
Well, if you want to bring me back, let's do that.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That could be interesting.
And I am against circumcision, and I will tell you all the reasons why I love talking about penises, though it's a great topic.
Time out. Normally, that's the kind of conversation we have on Fridays around here.
Sorry.
So no, that's fine. I mean, this is new territory. So that's good stuff. We might have to do that. You know, and that's the thing. We just played on the Friday live stream. It's ironic you said that. Kramer,
but going back to the headache for a second, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you. So
no, I just wanted to say, you know, if you go back to the 90s, Kramer, and you make a montage of all the crazy stuff that he said about the healthcare industry and just all these things that you were a kook for believing back in the 90s, that today it's like, oh yeah, that's common sense. Absolutely, I believe that. But one of the things that it's just so funny that the way this has all come together. The last Seinfeld episode, because I'm watching them all, I mentioned this, I'm just going back and rewatching them. And the last episode was Kramer trying to stop a circumcision. And so when you brought that up, I'm like, dear God, is Kramer right again? Anyway, but continue there. Sorry.
That might be God telling you that it's time to look into that. It's a hard topic for a lot of people, a lot of men. And I mean, we can talk about that because my husband has given me full reign to discuss because.
Okay, y'all, you've been warned. That might be a Wednesday wildcard show right there. Penis talk.
Right, ahead, penis talk. Oh, I like it. Penis talk. I mean, there's a lot to say. But
you already said Body Burden, which would be a hell of a band name, I'd like to point out. Anyway, continue.
But my point is just that when you're doing things in a gentler, more natural, more scientific, more science forward way, I really want to say it that way, because like one of my favorite articles that I highly recommend everybody read is from The Atlantic, and it's called "The Most Scientific Birth is the Least Technological," and it's just phenomenal. And it's it's really, really well researched by a medical historian named Alice Drager. But in any case, my point is that when you do things in a more natural way, you're not gonna go to the hard stuff unless you really need it. And when you really need it, I feel so grateful that it's there. So I am not even, and here, because God works in mysterious ways, Keith, when I had a devastating operation, I lost my eye. This is a fake eye. And
wow. Wow, that's great work, whoever did that.
Thanks. Actually, he's in Atlanta, Georgia, and I should give a shout out because he's an absolute genius. He's an ocularist named Tony Alcorta, and I've got great stories about him too. I don't know if I can share them, but he's a medical freedom, informed consent kind of a guy. He's wonderful.
Okay.
Literally the best ocularist in the country lives in Atlanta, Georgia. But I can't take opioids. They don't work for me, unfortunately. I would love to have the risk of being addicted, but they just don't take the pain away. The only drug that took away this pain, you know where I'm going with this, right? I mean, it was so funny. I was laughing because I just was like, okay, this is somehow part of my growth experience, was Tylenol. So, Tylenol, extra strength Tylenol, which I've spent more than well over a decade asking parents to be careful about Tylenol and researching and writing about. I did a audio feature for National Public Radio's affiliate station, Jefferson Public Radio, about Tylenol. And then here I was, and I couldn't do anything for this intractable pain but take Tylenol. So
that is wild.
I'm sharing that very honestly because I think it's so important not to ever beat yourself up about anything you've done in the past or anything that you need to do right now. And at the same time, start being more aware and educating yourself about the natural alternatives, because we have phenomenal natural alternatives. So
So is it safe, or at least safer than for adults to take Tylenol as opposed to babies? Is
So
that
it
kind of
is safer for adults. So the thing is, Tylenol is actually an effective drug for some people, very effective, right? And
okay?
the issue, so it is also the number one reason why people go to the emergency room with liver failure. And if you Google, ways of self-harm and assist, suicide, you're going to find like overdosing on Tylenol is one of the highest. It's going to come up very quickly because it's a great way to, I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's people do use it for that. It's terrible.
Hmm.
And it's a terrible thing, but it's true that you can cause yourself liver failure quite quickly. So the issue, and this is all, whether you take stock in the FDA or not, it's good advice that they have on their website, is the issue is not to overdose yourself on Tylenol, because you can literally cause yourself liver failure. If you are an alcoholic or you tend to drink too much, it's not safe for you as an adult to take Tylenol. That said, Tylenol at the dose is recommended for something like a headache or an intractable pain is fine. Should you ever take Tylenol before or after a vaccine? Absolutely never. Not a grown-up in America should do that, not a kid, but it's much more toxic. We believe, and I say it like that because this could change tomorrow with new research, that Tylenol is the most toxic for the developing brain in a small child, a newborn in a small child.
Wow. Okay. So we've talked about pregnant women. We've talked about newborns and young children. I mean, that vaccine schedule, that long list you showed. I mean, that's throughout childhood, and that goes right up. A friend of the program, Zainab, who hasn't been on here. We got to get her back on here for a while. It's been too long, but she has told the story of how she took the what was it I told you before we got started? She lost all the hair on her body.
Oh,
It
she
was
got alopecia.
yeah.
Yeah.
She
From
got
the
that from
from the Gardasil vaccine,
Gardasil.
yeah,
Yeah.
which
So
is
what?
HPV, which is also sexually transmitted, which is one of my least favorite vaccines on the planet.
Yeah, but she tells the story. It's like, in hindsight, like I was sick after the first shot. I think she said, why did I take the second one? And what was the point anyway of taking this? Just because somebody bullied her at the campus health center into taking it. Oh, you haven't had that? Oh, you need that. And so, but when I told you that she lost all the hair on her body, do you remember what you said to me before we went on the air here? You said, oh, well, she was lucky then, right? I mean, one of the lucky ones,
Yeah, she
basically,
was.
right?
I mean,
What,
because she had an extreme autoimmune reaction, but she didn't have nearly as extreme as it could have been.
why
So
the hell is that thing pushed?
yeah. Do I,
Oh, the
is that
lobby,
it? Is that,
the
do I
lobby,
get
though.
3 guesses and the first 2 don't count? I mean, exactly.
Show me the
And,
money.
because there's so much money, there's so much ego in medicine that, you know, once something becomes entrenched, then you're going to get so much, you say you're doing it for the money and people will get absolutely furious at you because they are going to say, no, we're doing it for the health of our nation. Well, if we're
Huh.
doing everything for the health of our nation, then our nation just needs to be healthier. The proof is always in the pudding. But I said that, Keith, because I was a couple of years ago, I was invited to be the MC at a science conference in Denmark. And the subject of the conference was aluminum and the Gardasil, hepatitis, the HPV, which is human papillomavirus, right? Vaccines. And one of the people who came to speak is a younger woman. She's not that young anymore, but she was in the trials, in the vaccine trials, and she's in a wheelchair. And I mean, she's absolutely devastated. And the thing is, what they did, they're so this is another way to make any mainstream doctor furious, is to say, well, what about the placebo controls? There aren't placebo controls. I say, of course there are placebo controls. Well, what did they do with the HPV? It turns out, and this was all came out, I believe, in Discovery. It's the subject of a fabulous documentary that we showed at this science conference in Denmark called Under the Skin. It's a really interesting documentary made by an Austrian filmmaker. But what we discovered in Discovery, I believe, is that all of the placebo vaccines contained the same amount of aluminum. So we're back to that
Oh, come
evil,
on.
injectable, unfortunately should never be injected, as the ones that were not the placebo. So basically, they saw the same outcomes with the people getting the HPV vaccine as getting the aluminum, as getting the placebo, because we didn't use a true placebo. And that is the case with many of these vaccines. And why are we doing HPV? I mean, the campaign, the PR campaign is so effective that I had an incredibly brilliant science, colleague say to me, but how can you criticize vaccines, any vaccines, Jennifer? We have a vaccine against cancer now, as like, thank gosh, we have this hepatitis, well, I keep saying hepatitis, this human papillomavirus vaccine, because then, people are not going to get cancer. It's like, well, your health is going to be devastated for the rest of your life, or you're going to have something awful like alopecia, but it's, you can wear a wig. Or, you may have a small amount of benefit from some very slow growing cancer. I don't think so. And in fact, the problem is once you put these things on the market, then the post-market surveillance gets very interesting. And you know what we keep finding? I mean, I did a huge article on this, and I can give you some links, and I don't have all of the numbers at my fingertips right now, but like basically we've seen that is an epic failure. The HPV vaccine literally is a vaccine that Dr. Thomas wanted to write in the book, and I made him take the sentence out, quote, "I wouldn't wish this vaccine on my worst enemy." And I said, Paul, I agree with you. And we can't say it that way because that's not the way to communicate with people trying to make good decisions. And I said, this really, if there were two vaccines, we've just talked about, if there were two vaccines that I would hope that we could strike in the absence of any, true medical, be HPV and hepatitis B. And neither one of those is a contagious disease, because this whole argument about how you're selfish if you don't do the vaccines because your child is going to get my child sick, or you're going to get me sick, doesn't apply if it's for sexually transmitted diseases. It's the only person you're putting at risk is the person you're getting intimate with.
Right. So, okay. How reliable is the VAERS system? For those that aren't familiar, I should have looked up. What is it? Do you know?
It's the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS. Yes.
All right. And so what that is that's where you go and self-report if you experience some sort of bad reaction to a vaccine, correct?
Yes, it's actually usually the doctor or the nurse or the emergency room attendant who's going to write the reports. So VAERS is a subject, it's a surveillance system that was set up by the CDC to track post-marketing surveillance of vaccines. And there's a wonderful website, hopefully it's still active, called openvaers.com. It's a way, because it's very hard for the public to use VAERS, and it's a huge time suck, and they make it as hard as possible. But if
I've heard that.
If you go to openvaers.com, hopefully she's still running. It's a nonprofit, and they were doing phenomenal work, just making it very readable so you can look things up more easily.
Okay.
But basically, you've got the two camps. There we go. Okay, so look at that first number. I mean, that's
it goes through February 27th of this year.
Yes, so good. We're in.
Oh, whoa! Look at that.
Yes.
Oh my word!
Have you never seen that, Keith? Because that's
I've seen so many charts in the COVID era, and this one, I think I might have, and just for some reason, how did I forget this? Let me zoom in.
But maybe you can explain to your viewers what they're
looking at. So what you're looking at is reports to VAERS year by year. I guess it started in 1991. It looks like not too many. I mean, we're down here, not much going on. Early aughts. Oh wait, hold on. Wait, something's starting to happen here. Mid aughts. Get to 2010, 2012. It's still nominally. Whoa, what the hell happened here? Holy crap. Does anybody remember? Because I can't seem to remember. Did anything get introduced in the world of vaccines long about 2021? Because woo, what a spike. Oh, wow. Oh, look at this. You can hover. So we have 57. So we're down here. We're 36,000, 57. We had 57,000 reports. And if you'll recall, it was right at Christmas. I remember it was Christmas break 2020 when we had that guy. He had that very interesting name. What was his name? The first guy in Britain who got the COVID vaccine. Somebody do my job for me. Where's Brad when I need him? Someone look up British guy first COVID vax. In fact, I think he died from. Well, anyway, y'all look it up. It had some interesting name. But anyway, all VAERS reports in 2021, 752,000. What is the difference here? U.S. So holy crap. Okay, so all VAERS reports over 1 million in 2021, which 3/4 of those, more than that, roughly that, were from the U.S. Is that how I'm reading this, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
In addition, hold on a second. Is that so? I guess so. This is all okay. Yeah. Holy crap, y'all! What are we doing to ourselves?
So I mean, so going back to your question, it's interesting that now things have gone down quite a bit. Actually, would you hover in the most recent? What is how many? So 40,000
in America.
In the US alone, 55,000 for other places. You know, what's interesting about that is you go, oh, not that many, 40,000. Well, I live in a town of about 20,000. So that would mean twice the number of every single resident in my town. You know, that's the equivalent of an enormous amount of people are filing these adverse reaction reports. So everyone knows that vaccines can cause bad reactions, right? And the question is, are they causing them so much that we need to be doing post-market surveillance? And that's why the system was set up. Then what's very interesting is that the same people who use the CDC and the FDA and the government and, to justify the vaccine schedule will say, oh, well, VAERS is not valid. And the reason why it's not valid is because it's not every single, report is not being authenticated. Well, that is such a specious argument, Keith, because I will tell you, talk to any doctor who has tried to actually file a report, especially in 2021 and 2022, they were getting kicked out of the system. The system was glitching. I mean, it was completely overloaded. Right. And let's just say that X percentage of these reports maybe aren't valid. But I will tell you that somebody did an experiment where they said, they like tried to game the system and said something like the Incredible Hulk, the Incredible Hulk had a bad reaction. And lo and behold, the CDC flagged that and went, there are humans looking at this system who then will go and follow up with the doctor, follow up with the person who filed the report. So it was a way of saying, well, look, you can even file a report from the Incredible Hulk. But the truth is that showed that the system is working. But let's say that some percentage of VAERS isn't accurate. There are two things that your listeners need to know. One is that we have data showing that probably only 2% of the actual number of reactions are being reported. So this is a tiny fraction. And that's important.
I'd forgotten that. Yes, only say that again. Say that again, please.
What we've seen from the Harvard study, and there's actually been several other studies that have backed this up, and the number is debatable, but the most extreme is that only 2% of the actual vaccine reactions are being reported. And given how stalled out this system and how unfriendly it is, even for doctors who file it, I believe that's true. And Keith, I've sat next to a lot of doctors on airplanes, and I've talked to many, many, many. I have literally hundreds of doctors in my Rolodex. The vast majority have never heard of VAERS. And in my personal experience, this is N equals 1. This is not, quantifiable or like whatever reproducible, but I'd like you to go ask every doctor you've ever talked to, have you ever heard of VAERS? And then the emergency room doctors who I sit next to on airplanes, right? Not only like most of them haven't heard of VAERS, and then the ones who have, I say, have you ever filed a VAERS report? They say no. And then I say, have you ever seen a bad reaction? They usually will say, well, I did, but it wasn't enough to file, or, oh, I thought blah, blah, or no, I just felt like it was a coincidence. So in my little tiny microcosm of trying to find out if this is true, I would say that there's that it must be between something like 2 and 10% are being filed. So that's the first thing that I want everybody to think about. It's really important. And the other thing is, let's pretend, just for the sake of argument, Keith, let's pretend that a certain number of these reports are spurious, or something else happened, you know. So the most devastating of these reports are the ones where the baby died of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, you know, hours or one day after the vaccine. I mean, those are the most difficult to read. But let's pretend that some of them, a certain percentage of them, aren't true. Well, that would not have changed over time. What I mean is that if we want to say 10% of them are invalid, or even 50%, so the actual number might be wrong, but the relative number is going to be correct. What I mean is that to see this kind of spike in 2021 is a huge red flag. It's an absolute data signal. Because do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, you can say that the system has reporting issues. I think that is
Right.
a fair and valid criticism. Those reporting issues did not change between.
Yeah, that would have applied in 2018, 2010. That kind of
exactly
similar hiccup would still apply.
Right. So we can use this as a very valid system to get a data point that can help us do more research, basically. Although why you have to research when somebody dies basically with a needle sticking out of their arm, and then you're going to see what, I can't imagine what did it, you know, is just a testament to how reluctant the medical system is to change something broken. But it's still valid to, you know, to use the system and pay attention to it.
Yes, and Born Genius coming through as always. I was able to locate. I was surprised that the first COVID vaccine patient in Britain, I had forgotten her name, was Margaret Keenan. But then you got it right. You found it. William Shakespeare. That was the name of the dude that got the COVID. I think the first male patient. But find out how he died. That's your next assignment there, Born Genius, because I want to know how he died, because there's and you know what? I mean, I'm a Braves fan, and it was early January of 2021 when Hank Aaron died way too soon, Braves legend. And I think that was really the first signal that he had just gotten the shot days before, and he was in good health, because he would show up. This is going to sound like sports, but everyone just relax for a second. I watch every freaking Atlanta Braves game, and at least once a year, Hank Aaron would show up in the booth, and he sounded in fine health. He worked for the Braves in the front office. I mean, he sounded like a very healthy. I don't even know how old he was, but it wasn't like he struggled getting up to the booth, as far as I knew, and he sounded great, in good health and good spirits. Great innings whenever Hank Aaron would be on in the Braves game. Gets the shot. I don't know, I think it was a week later, maybe 13 days. I don't forget exactly. And that was the signal that, oh, crap, our worst fears are being realized with this thing. And
yeah. But you can't forget that absolutely you're not allowed to say that. I mean, how many people who just sort of said, you know, when they were being interviewed about something else, people like Eric Clapton, who said, I got a vaccine and I was absolutely devastated. And then there's a campaign to remove his music from the internet.
The dude said, you know, like, I couldn't play the guitar after I got vaccinated. Get him out of here. What the hell? I mean, I thought we were supposed to listen to everyone's experience, and everybody was important, and everybody's voice needed to be heard.
Well, so welcome to what the moms and dads with children whose brains have been devastated have been dealing with. Now we see it happening to other people too. But these are people who absolutely, like you described yourself at the beginning of this show. I mean, I interviewed a mom who was so down with the program that she made sure her child went in. Let's say that he was born on March 20th. Well, it was always had to be on the 20th of the month. And every time there was anything extra, anything, she said, please, yes. And she would rush there. And she ended up with 2 sons, both with autism. And she was a mama bear, and she was not gonna she did not want this to be true. So she, with one of her sons, she went to 5 medical doctors and got 5 doctors to confirm the diagnosis. And then she did what your friend did, and she started detoxifying her son. She started absolutely learning everything she could about vaccine reactions and how to help. And luckily she was very wealthy and could afford to do every modality. And she basically got her son recovered from autism. Wow. And she went back to the doctors, the same mainstream doctors who then said, oh, he never had autism. It must have been a faulty diagnosis.
All
So
right.
because we have this ridiculous narrative that nothing causes autism, we have to continue a ridiculous narrative that nothing can solve autism. And so then when we see the proof in black and white, Keith, 5 medical doctors diagnose it, then we throw because of the ego in medicine, they were more comfortable saying, oh, all those doctors were wrong and your son never had autism. And, you know, she has proof. She has the videos, she has the photos, she has the diary entries, she has everything. But that's not enough to satisfy people who are trying to defend a broken system.
Yeah. And let me just, by the way, Born Genius, unrelated illness. William Shakespeare died, according to the BBC. Unrelated to what? I mean, methinks you doth protest too much. Look at that. I brought that full circle. Anyway, sorry. Okay. But to your point there, and I just, this is going to sound political, but it's not meant to be. But in late 2020, let me actually go forward. It was, I don't know, spring of 2021. Someone posted on X, just a regular citizen, talked about how they were devastated and they're pretty sure that the vaccine killed their child. And I thought that's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And then for whatever reason, whatever motivated me, I thought, okay, let's just see. Let's see if I looked up their tweets on vaccines. Okay. I just wanted to see what their attitude was, you know, and I found a tweet from late 2020 that said, I'm never putting Trump's shot in my body. But then I found another tweet from this individual in January of 2021, I guess post January 20th, 2021, saying how excited they were to get the vaccine. And then by March, their child had died from the thing. It's like, trust your freaking instincts. Don't make decisions based on politics and who's in the freaking White House. If you have a bad feeling about something, then just stick with that feeling. Stick with your gut. Even if the parties were reversed, I would have said the same thing. If your gut tells you, and we're going to talk about this in a deep dive in a couple of weeks with Iraq, okay? The Iraq war from 20 years ago. You know, if I had trusted my instincts on that early on, I wouldn't feel like a dumbass today. And that's why we need to revisit that. So anyway, I get off the rails here. I'm sorry. But I want to talk about autism for sure, because it's so interesting that you mentioned Dr. Peter McCullough talking to you, say, hey, tell me about vaccines and autism. And I love Peter McCullough, and I find it fascinating to hear that little anecdote from you when his McCullough Foundation just reviewed over 300 studies, and they determined that the number one risk factors, everyone's sitting down for this breaking news, the number one risk factor for autism is combination vaccines. It just, how is this message not getting through? Or maybe it is, and I'm just impatient, but how is this message not getting through in mass? Or am I wrong on that?
No, I'm going to tell you how, though. It goes back to what you did before, because the thing is, I mean, so so people, families, humans bent to my ear, you know, and I think we have to always listen to the parents and listen to the people. And so every person is going to have a different experience. But I said a while before that we wouldn't be having this conversation if we weren't seeing so many problems with our children's health, you know. And the thing is that, I mean, you hear that story over and over and over again, where you hear a younger mom saying, my kid was fine, my kid was developing normally, and then after this amount of time and this amount of shots, they lost their words, they lost their ability to walk, they lost their ability to speak, and the doctor said, it's not the vaccines. And, you know, I mean, you just hear some version of that over and over. I talked to a nurse whose husband was a doctor, and she said, my child, we did everything the way the medical establishment, we are the medical establishment, wanted us to, and our child was devastated. And when I said to the doctor, what could have caused this? The doctor said, I don't know, very honestly. And then she said, well, could it be vaccines? He said, absolutely not. So how can you have that
Right.
happen at the same time over and over again? And the truth is that I wasn't pulling that out of nowhere when I said that the pharmaceutical companies who have the most to lose put literally millions of dollars into campaigns with and they're, they're talking directly, they're talking directly to journalists. Every single journalist in health care and health is having their ear bent by the industry. And and then the politicians are having their ears bent by the industry. And, they're actually doing things like they hire people to pose as parents and to go around on social media and derail the conversation. So there's such a stigma to saying, even just saying what Eric Clapton said, I couldn't play the guitar after I got the COVID vaccine. So if you say, I brought my child to the doctor and he got vaccines and he's been crying for the last 48 hours. And when I brought him in, he had a fever of 106, you're going to get attacked for just going on social media among your friends and saying what happened. And some of the people who will attack you changed during COVID or who did attack you changed during COVID. So I had a mom call me up who said to me, whose son is now having, I should follow up with her actually, these terrible, terrible heart problems. And he was 14 years old. He wants to be a doctor. He got the COVID vaccine and he had myocarditis and he ended up in the hospital. And then when I had talked to her, it was in the summer, she was crying. And she said, he's the most active kid on the planet. He can't even go in the water. He's so exhausted because when you have a heart problem, you get exhausted. One of the biggest presenting symptoms, he's just watching, he can lie on the raft and watch his cousins, and then he has to go sleep for the rest of the day. And she said to me, when I interviewed her and I wrote an article about it, she didn't want to be on the record. And then National Geographic wrote an article about it and she used her full name. And she said, I was that person, Jennifer. I was the person writing on Twitter to the moms and saying, you're wrong. It didn't happen. It was a coincidence. Why are you so anti-vaccine? And she said, and now it's happened to my son. And now she's eating crow. And I don't want anyone to eat crow. I never want to say I told you so. I don't want to be right. Like I say this to scientists.
Yes.
I don't want to be right. And when I say that to a scientist, often they don't get it. They're like, well, I know I'm right. What do you mean? And I'm like, I want you to be wrong. I want to be wrong about acetaminophen. I want to be wrong about the synergistic negative effects of toxic exposure. I want to be wrong about the vaccines. I want all of that to be good, solid, safe. And it's not. If it were, I would be the first one to tell you I was spreading the wrong information and now we have better science and we know better. But the thing is that we know we're not wrong because we see it happening every single day before our eyes. And what we're trying to do, I think you and I, is prevent, and anybody, who had a problem or who's thinking about these things and researching them and also talking to humans, is prevent it from ever happening again. My entire motivation for talking about this stuff, and I have been so vilified for it on both sides of the equation, but mostly by people who are very vehemently pro-vaccine, who call me a dangerous, vile, disgusting human. Go to my Facebook today and you can start looking at the comments. I get these doctors come and attack me. They love it. They love to hate me. And I don't know, they make new Facebook profiles or they're posing, because I usually block them from my personal wall, who say things like, you are a vile individual. You are, don't let your dirty, filthy children play with mine. And, because why? And I continue to speak about it. Why? Because we just want to fix this system. And because, somebody's got to talk about it. But the amount of anger and vehemence that comes to you from the mainstream when you just tell your story is very effective censorship. It's very effective at silencing people. The vast majority of the people I know who choose to do things more gently or do no vaccines, what I say, if you don't want to do any vaccines for your kids, you just say, I've chosen to delay. And then what you don't add the adverb, which is indefinitely. So you've chosen to delay vaccines indefinitely. You can always change your mind. That's the thing, is you don't do something, you can change your mind to do it. You do something and you have a bad outcome, you never get to get that back again.
Yeah.
But, you know, people won't admit that publicly. And there's so many public officials, including people inside the CDC. I know this, Keith, because I have interviewed them, who are not doing all of the vaccines on the schedule because they are using their brains. And when you add, you know, when you put this much money from the pharmaceutical industry into it, and I had a woman who had a child with massive brain damage who came and talked to me about it. And her husband is a PR professional. The one thing he won't do, that's how they pay for all of her family's treatments. The one thing he won't do is he won't work on any pharmaceutical campaigns, but he is in the office and he saw the spreadsheet, and we're talking about one company. And this was like 15 years ago. So a little bit less. It was 2012. One company paying over $1 million to one firm, the best PR firm in a city I'm not going to mention because these were off the record conversations. So you have $1 million on the one hand, and then you have the stressed out, exhausted family with a child smearing their feces against the wall, banging their head because their head hurts so much, and you know, and then bloodying their hands by biting it. On the other equation, who wins the fight? Every single time. And then you have it completely skewed in the media. And, you know, even media that promises to be unbiased. I mean, I was interviewed on a show called The Vaccine War from PBS. Okay. They came to our house. The producer I had many conversations with. One of the things I said, and, you know, they went and they saw my kids, they took B-roll of my kids doing gymnastics. I have 4 kids. I have 3 daughters and a son, and they were very little. I have my little baby on my lap. And then when they came down to it, they had interviewed 2 doctors who supported my point of view. My point of view is give parents informed consent, let you have medical freedom. Not all vaccines are safe for all kids at all time. I don't know about you, but that feels kind of a reasonable point of view to me.
Sure does.
And I said to this wonderful woman, I liked her a lot. We were the same age, you know, we were talking. This producer from PBS, I said, you know, in our town, there are lots of people choosing to do it all the different ways, and we're all cohabitating and nobody is fighting with each other. So what did she do? She lied about my kids' vaccine status in the voiceover of the PBS. We had to threaten to sue them. And she took out, and not she, but probably her backstop. There were 2 doctors, right? 2 MDs, medical doctors, one of whom I mentioned, Bob Sears, and the other one was Jay Gordon, who's also a very mainstream in some ways, not Bob, but a pretty mainstream California-based doctor. He works with a lot of celebrities. He's a very, very smart, open-minded guy. He and I don't see eye to eye on everything, but I have nothing but respect for him. They did hours-long interviews with both of them, and they deleted them from the show. So what they did is they ended up with a 50-minute documentary that made it look like one person, me with long hair, much younger, and a baby on my back, on my knee. One person, one mom. That's how they were identifying me. None of my other credentials, versus the entire white-haired masculine medical establishment. And I don't mean to be like evoking, you know, gender politics, but the truth is they made it the crazy young mom. I wasn't that young, but I was younger than I am now. The crazy young mom versus the brilliant scientists and medical doctors, and they didn't include any of the nuance that I asked them to include. And I can give you 5 more examples of how that is done every single time. Every time. Just one more. MSNBC came to my house to interview me because I've always had this opinion. And now that my kids are older, luckily it didn't come back to bite me. But where an honest question deserves an honest answer, and I will talk to any journalist willing to actually listen. And it'll either be an off-the-record conversation or on-the-record conversation. I know the journalist wants to make me look stupid. Go ahead and try. If she succeeds, it's my bad. And if I can plant any kind of seed, I've done something right. So MSNBC comes to my house, and they interview me for several hours, and they did a little thing with my 8-year-old who's now 25. She just turned 25, in the backyard. Very cute, very sweet. We had a really nice conversation, and she turned off the tape recorder. And she went to the bathroom, and in the bathroom, I went to the bathroom. On the way out of the bathroom, I said one thing. now that the tape recorder was off and my hair was down, proverbially, right? The only quote she used in the entire article was the thing that I said off the record that made me look like a stupid idiot. And she did it fabulously. She made me look like a stupid idiot. She could not use anything else I said because absolutely everything I said was careful. And I'm a media savvy person. And I was stupid enough to let my hair down for less than 5 minutes. And that's all that MSNBC reported. So this is why people think I'm an asshole, like the mainstream. I mean, I say that word. I hope it's okay to say that on your podcast.
You should tune in on Fridays.
I had Seth Mnookin, who is a writer, and he teaches science writing at MIT. Okay, MIT, one of the best schools in the country, top 3, right? Call me an asshole. Now that has been taken down, but you can find it on the internet. And because he's never bothered to try to reach out to me or talk to me, I've tried to get in touch with him. He hasn't responded. He wants to think that anybody who doesn't do all the vaccines on the schedule exactly as the CDC asks for are stupid or selfish or misinformed. The truth is we are the least stupid, the least selfish, and the best informed.
Right. What is that? The answer is usually follow the money. And that can definitely be said for these corporations and for many of these doctors that toe the line here. But that can't be said for everyone. It sure as hell couldn't have been said for the people during COVID that were just obsessed with what I was doing with my own body and what I was injecting or not injecting and all that stuff. So what is this almost and I don't think bullying is a strong enough word. It's almost like demonic possession for how they react to people that don't conform to the societal norms. I mean, it's just so weird.
Yeah, especially when it comes from people who used to pride themselves on being tolerant.
Right,
I mean,
right. That's the deep fried irony.
The kind of intolerance coming from people who are supposedly tolerant, but they're not tolerant. It's just, I do think that a lot of it has to do with ego. I mean, the more mature you get, the older you get, the more you refine your relationship with something bigger than yourself. I believe the less defensive you are and the less ego driven you are. And, so many people, it's their entire ego is on the line. I mean, don't you remember this, Keith? Like I had ultrasounds during my first pregnancy, and then I read an article in an alternative magazine about the dangers of exposure to ultrasound, and I got really upset. I didn't get upset at myself. I got upset at the article. I was like, there's nothing. I did ultrasounds. My kid is fine. There's nothing wrong with this. And I use that as a signal. When I get angry like that, that's a signal for me to stop my emotions and start using my brain. And I was like, okay, I got to look into this. Maybe there is something to it. The fact that I got so emotional about it shows that I was being ego driven, not logic driven. Let me take a look. And if more people could do that and fewer people would be, bullying and gaslighting on social media, we live in a better world.
I thought when you started to talk about someone coming to your small town and interviewing you, I thought you were going to conclude with something along the lines of there's a measles outbreak in my town and they blamed me, the mom that was anti-vax. I thought that's where that story was going to go. But we now see measles popping up in parts of the country. And of course, if you don't like vaccines, you're the reason why. It has nothing to do with open borders and people from third world countries that aren't checked at the border coming in here. No. It's the anti-vax among us.
Well, and it has nothing to do with vaccine failure, right? Let's think about this for a minute.
Oh, that's a good point. So there's a third option. Yeah, let's go.
I mean, the obvious reason, the only reason you should be furious and angry if someone gets the measles who's been vaccinated is because the vaccine didn't work. That's, come on, right? Do you have an argument against that? I mean, it's like I took a medicine to protect myself against something and I got the thing. Well, who do I blame? I think I should blame the medicine, but we are now so conditioned that we're going to blame other humans for being
almost like
living
class,
in community.
Right. It's almost like class warfare. I mean, boy, the government, man, they are good at pitting us against each other, aren't they?
Well,
and the media.
That it's true. And because fear sells and,
fear
we want to emphasize our differences instead of talking about what we all have in common. And oh boy, do I get people angry at me when I say all I care about is, I mean, which is true. I care about public health. I care about humans being healthy. We all do. I do believe that we all do, even though we come at it from different perspectives.
Right. I want to just put a bow on William Shakespeare. You know, there's that guy in Britain that got that. Look at that. See, I knew there was something about how he died. Thank you, Born Genius. He died of a stroke. That should have been a signal. And I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. Okay, I know that he was up there in age because we got the elderly transfer. But remember now, when a vaccine is suspected in a death, it used to be we just stop the assembly line. We got to stop everything right now and look into what just caused this death, and then we move on. In good faith, but no. William Shakespeare tried to warn us with his stroke death. Anyway,
Keith, I want to put a bow on something else that you
Yeah.
said about like this is a good use for AI. So I was looking at an article, like a really ridiculously pro-vaccine pharma propaganda article, and I decided just to get on the AI bandwagon, which I'm reluctant. I'm sort of in the 20th century, not the 21st. In many ways, I'm a very analog person.
Me
and
too.
So I said, could you please rewrite this article from a critical point of view that problematizes vaccines? And the answer that AI gave me is no, I cannot do that, because that would be, I will not do something that could potentially be dangerous.
You want to tell which AI you use there? Because I think I know who it was.
We were looking on Chat GPT.
GPT, that's what I thought.
And so I refined, because apparently what my people say is that, you know, garbage in, garbage out, you've got to ask the question the right way. So then I said, could you please rewrite this article from a fair and nuanced, balanced point of view, like the writing of, and I shouldn't even admit this live, but I will anyway, Jennifer Margulis. So I was like, well, let's because I'm part of these class action lawsuits. All these companies have taken all of my books and my mother's books. My mother was a very prolific scientist. She wrote these wonderful books. And so I was like, I know that they know how I write and how I research. And I said, and please cite your sources. And they said, well, the AI responded that they were willing. It was willing to do that. And it spit out the most ridiculous, unbalanced, unfair, completely biased, basically just kind of applauding, you know, saying that, yeah, parents should have a choice, or not a choice, but parents have concerns and we should take them seriously. It was so ridiculous.
When you get a chance, just do this for me, because I just checked your Twitter profile, because you're at Jennifer Margulis. Not enough characters.
With no S at the end.
Take the S off, yeah. But I was checking to see if you had the check, and the reason I did that to see if you had access to like super grok, you know. So here's what I want you to do when you get a chance later. Email me specifically the prompt you want me to put into grok, and then I will send you what grok says about you, so you can compare the X AI compared to the Chat GPT. Here's an interesting fact that I wanted to tuck in here.
But before you go there, I have a hard stop at 2 p.m. my time, which is 5 p.m. yours. So I was trying to tell you that in the chat, and
I didn't. I'm so bad at that,
sorry.
man. No, hard stop. Hang on. Yep. Oh gosh, you gave me lots of warnings. Sorry. All right. So if you had to say to young parents, are there any vaccines? I realize that you may want no vaccines, Jennifer, but if somebody says, look, I want to give them some, are there any ones that you would say, hey, get these if you're going to get any?
It's always easier to say which ones to avoid than to say which ones to do. But let me tell you, if you're going to vaccinate, there are a few things you absolutely have to do. Okay. So one of them is, as long as you're exclusively breastfeeding and you're eating a clean diet and you're not putting your child in daycare or, or in a lot of group situations, I would say delay. So basically the better, you're going to have better uptake the vaccine, meaning the vaccine is going to be more effective if you don't do it within the first 2 years of the baby's life. And so I would like to champion exclusive breastfeeding for as long as you possibly can and delaying the vaccines. And then, if you do some, you absolutely never give a child acetaminophen. So no Tylenol before, no Tylenol after. Also, don't ever allow a doctor to vaccinate a sick baby. We always didn't do that. Meaning when you, even probably when your kids were little and mine, if a baby came in with a cold or the baby was getting over an ear infection, which by the way, you'll stop vaccinating, your kids are never going to get an ear infection again, but that's another story. But if a baby came in with a cold, they'd say, and that's what, that's what Dr. Thomas would do too. They'd say, let's do it next time. Let's wait. Let's let the baby's immune system have a chance to recover. So, those are super important points to keep in mind. And then basically what you're doing is, because I did vaccinate my kids, Keith, I did it in a very different, much gentler way. And
no multiples at the same time.
No, especially not aluminum containing shots. That is the worst. So, I would say, and then I would say you do a risk benefit analysis, and you also have to sit with yourself. Are you more worried about your child getting Y or Z, like chickenpox? Or are you more worried about your child having a bad reaction? And I would just say you're much more likely at this juncture to see a bad reaction than you are to see a disease. But that's a decision that you have to make in your family.
Okay, we will have you back on. I'm going to let you go here. I'll take you off the screen here. So you go and take care of your life. And I will have you back on, I promise you. If you'll join us again, we'd really appreciate it. The vaccine-friendly plan. Go and check that out. Dr. Jennifer Margulis, thanks for making time for us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith.
Thank you. Bye-bye. But I want to spend a little bit of time with y'all here because I'm sorry. I had a couple quick things I wanted to get to y'all here. Ed McRae, who is an incredible, I'm going to start calling him a pop culture historian. He sent me this thing about the Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, and I had no idea that everybody knows them. I should have gotten a picture ready. Everybody knows these. I mean, I had them as a kid. I think I had one or two. Hell, I don't know. But you know how they look all lifeless, and they've got the weird, right? Is it a tongue sticking out? Somebody, I almost asked. See, I'm used to asking Brad to look stuff up for me. Hang on a second. Raggedy Ann and Andy. I meant to get this. Andy, let's see here. Let's see. I know that you guys know what I'm talking about, but I just wanted to see if my memory. See, here they are with a smiley face, but the original ones, right? The original ones had like they looked like they were just like maybe it's part of the Mandela effect. But I know they just looked this out of it, right? Well, anyway, I guess the story goes that the guy who created them. I guess at the time, the dolls were really robust and happy and excited and all this stuff. But his daughter, who he blamed vaccines on, this is 1920s, I think, when they negatively affected his daughter and ultimately took her life, according to her parents, he made this doll, and it became like this big thing, a big seller. 1920, Chicago department store started selling them. And he was just saying, this is what my daughter is like now after the vaccines. That's the way the story goes. Ed McRae is a great resource for that stuff. But I will definitely have Dr. Jennifer Margulis back on. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. So much information there and so much more stuff to get to. I have a Post-it note somewhere around here of all the different topics that we need to go over with her. And one of the things that RFK pointed out in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, which I'd highly recommend, it should be called The Real Anthony Fauci and The Real Bill Gates. It just talks about the devastation that those two individuals have brought to not only our nation, but the rest of the world, quite frankly. And some of the things in Africa are just unspeakable. And I would highly recommend that book. But it talks about the rates of autism among the Amish. And because that was a question I was going to get to. I saw somebody ask that. Yeah, someone explain that. Why are they so incredibly low in that community? I'm pretty sure that was the book that really got into that, if I remember correctly. I've read a couple of books about vaccines and some of the unintended consequences, or are they? Anyway, and I know that was pointed out in one of those books that I read about the Amish and autism rates in there. Much lower, much maybe even non-existent, if I remember correctly. Anyhow, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. Tomorrow we'll do the Friday live stream. Rebecca is planning to be here. I'm going to reach out to Zay, actually, and see if she can join us, who we talked about there briefly. And so next week at this time, so what did I tell you? Wednesday, Stu Bergier will be here for the Wednesday wild card, 3 p.m. Eastern, live on X and YouTube. And then Thursday, we're going to talk about the income tax. Paul Mangus will be my guest for that, the history of the income tax, which, holy crap, it sucks. I mean, let me just give you a little teaser here. The guy who introduced the little seed of a bill that turned into what you've been obsessing over for the past several months on your dining room table as April 15th fast approaches, it all started with a bill that a guy said wouldn't get passed. Thank you for that, sir. And then so what do we do? Oh, Friday's just the Friday live stream. Just the Friday live stream. Brad will be back, I know, for that one next week. But until tomorrow, 22 hours from now, I hope that you stay safe and you stay well, and don't inject any vaccines in your body if you're asking for medical advice from me. I'm not qualified to give it, but I do enjoy common sense. So there. All right. Have a great one. Appreciate you as always. Please share this show. Please. Here's one last ask. I'm sorry. Go to Spotify. Please do follow over there. That would be so tremendously helpful. In fact, you can do what Steve Friend suggested yesterday. You don't even have to listen. You just go and you follow me on Spotify and look for At the Mike Show. It's the black square. I got to take the green square show off of there. It's the black square show that says At the Mike Show. And then you press play and you go walk away. Just turn the volume down and go take care of whatever you need to do. And just let it play. But no, seriously, if you would follow or subscribe, whatever the hell it's called over there, I sure would appreciate it. I'll see you in 22 hours. Thank you so much for being